Alvin, the problem of evil is a problem for those who believe in God, and the argument from evil is used by atheists to show there is no God. How do we begin to approach evil from a theistic point of view?
Well, I think the first thing is to emphasize what you said. The problem of evil is at least two things. It's a serious problem for believers in God, can be anyway, and it also offers ammunition for arguments against the existence of God. On the first point, if you go back to the book of Job, here was Job who found himself really afflicted. You know, he had boils all over and his children were killed and he was sitting on an ash heap, and these silly friends of his, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, forgot the name of the third one. Anyway, they came and they kept telling him that God always treats people according to to how they behave. If they behave well, they get treated really well. If they behave badly, they get treated really badly. So Job, you must be a real snicker. But Job knows he's no worse than they are. He doesn't know why this has been happening to him, and he rebels against God. He wants to go to court with God. He says, "I would like to plead my case against you." And then his face falls and he says, "Of course I realize you would be the judge and the jury and the jailer and the executioner, so that's not going to work either." But he doesn't ever say to himself, maybe there isn't any such person as God. He never says that at all. He just gets angry with God. And that's the kind of problem of evil that serious believers in God can have. But on the other hand, there's this other whole attempt to argue that there isn't any such person as God, starting from the fact of evil.
Now, you've come up with a theodicy, even though you've said that theodicies are hard and defenses are much less troublesome, but you think that there may be a theodicy.
If I had to bet, I would bet on the following story as a theodicy, or as something at least in the neighborhood. So you start with the idea that God wants to create a really good world. There are all these possible worlds that he can select among. He wants to actualize, cause to be actual, a really good one. So then we have to think about what makes one world better than another world. What, you might say, what good-making properties or characteristics among worlds are. Well, there'd be things like how many people there are living happy lives and so on, that sort of thing. But the Christian story presents one particular, I would say, really massive, superlative, great-making characteristic. For according to the Christian story, God created human beings. God, the first being of the universe, created human beings to have fellowship with him. Human beings, though, turned their backs on God and rejected him, rebelled against God. Well, what God did was not, let's say, to heck with them and, do away with a whole lot of them. Not at all. What God did was to institute a scheme of salvation which required enormous suffering on his own part. The life and suffering and death of Jesus, the second person of the Trinity. Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity. I mean, the suffering involved there. Think of Mel Gibson's movie, the suffering that this person, Jesus Christ, who is both God and human, underwent. And even more than that suffering, there was his cry on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Forsaken by, a member of the Trinity, feeling forsaken by God, by the Father, another member of the Trinity. It's hard to imagine, any possible world in which that actually takes place, has got to be a great possible world. That's probably as great a good-making characteristic as there is. The Christian story is often said to be the greatest story ever told. I would be inclined to go beyond that. It's the greatest story that ever could be told. So any world in which that happens will be a great world, and any really great world will be one in which there is something like incarnation and atonement.
But
And-
are you saying this happened by accident because humans sinned, or this happened in the world, or was that something that God pre-planned from the start?
Well, I'd say it's got to be something that he selected from the start. He had all these different possibilities, all these different possible worlds he could have made actual. He wanted to make a really good one actual. All the best ones contain incarnation and atonement, but any world that contains incarnation and atonement also has to contain evil, sin, and not just a little bit of it. I mean, if all the evil there was mere peccadillo on the part of an otherwise admirably disposed angel, then there would be massive overkill for there to be incarnation and atonement. So there's got to be a lot of it. And hence any world, any really good world is going to contain a great deal of evil.
So God is choosing worlds that have evil, so that tantamounts to God creating evil.
I don't know if it
to it.
amounts to his creating evil, but it does amount to his choosing worlds that contain evil. I mean, the evil is a means to or a necessary condition of something really good. It's not that the evil gets chosen for its own sake, but this whole world, which contains evil, does get chosen, right?
How then would you deal with the events that occur before human beings were here? The so-called rose fawn that was burned
Right.
in a forest fire
yeah.
before humans ever knew about it or heard about it, or how is that compatible?
Well, I mean, it's not incompatible, but it doesn't look like it fits in very easily. But it's a part of Christian belief to think that human beings aren't the only free creatures operating in God's world. There are the principalities and powers mentioned in the New Testament. There are Satan and his cohorts. Satan mentioned in the book of Job, in the Job story, for example. It may be that as C.S. Lewis suggests in his space trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet and so on, it may be that other creatures, other free creatures have had a substantial hand in the whole development of life on Earth, so that all the waste, all the pain, all the suffering that goes along with predation in the whole evolution of life, starting say, I don't know, 500 million years ago or something like that, all that is also, in the long run, due to the free activity of other creatures. That's a possibility. It's kind of a wild suggestion, and one which nowadays will raise eyebrows, but I don't think that's anything against it.
It's never stopped you before.
Exactly, right.